Johnny Carson had been hosting The Tonight Show for 30 years. 30 years of monologues that became morning conversation. 30 years of making America laugh before bed. He'd interviewed every imaginable guest, presidents, astronauts, comedians, musicians, actors. He'd seen it all. Done it all. Mastered it all. But that night in 1993, Bob Hope was about to do something that would break every rule Johnny thought he understood about television. Bob Hope was 90 years old. A legend didn't quite cover it. He was an institution. 6 decades of entertaining troops, hosting the Oscars, defining American comedy. He and Johnny had a relationship that went back further than most marriages. Bob had been a guest on The Tonight Show dozens of times. They had a rhythm. A shorthand. The kind of comfort that comes from mutual respect and genuine affection. Bob was scheduled that night as a surprise drop-in. Not a full interview segment. Just a quick hello. Wave to the crowd. Exchange a few jokes with Johnny. Classic stuff. Easy. Professional. What they'd done 100 times before. The show started normally. Johnny did his monologue. Political jokes. A bit about the weather. Some observational humor about everyday life. The audience laughed in all the right places. Everything was running smoothly. Then Johnny paused, looked at the camera with that trademark twinkle, and said, "We have a very special guest in our audience tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Hope." The crowd erupted. Bob stood from his seat in the front row. He was moving slower now. 90 years showed in the careful way he navigated the aisle. But the smile was the same. That Hope's smile that had reassured soldiers in wartime and made millions laugh in peacetime. He waved. The applause grew louder. Johnny came out from behind his desk to greet him. They met center stage. Hugged. The kind of hug that's real. That carries decades of friendship. When they separated, Johnny gestured to the guest chair. "Sit down, Bob. Stay a while." Bob looked at the chair. Looked at Johnny. And said something that wasn't in anyone's script. "Not yet, Johnny. I need to stand for this one." The audience laughed. Thought it was part of the bit. Johnny's smile faltered slightly. Just for a second. He knew Bob too well. That wasn't a setup for a joke. That was something else. "Bob?" Johnny said quietly, the microphone barely catching it. Bob Hope looked out at the audience. At the cameras. At the crew he'd known for decades. And he took a breath that seemed to carry all 90 years. "I'm not supposed to be here tonight," Bob said. His voice was steady but different. The performer's polish was still there, but something underneath had changed. "The doctors told me to stay home. Said I shouldn't travel. But I told them I had to come see Johnny one more time." The audience went quiet. Not the dramatic silence of a reveal. The confused silence of people trying to understand what they were hearing. Johnny's expression shifted from professional host to genuine concern. "Bob, what are you? Let me finish, John." Bob raised a hand gently. Johnny stopped. Nodded. In that moment, the 30-year host became the listener. Bob turned to face the audience more fully. 6 weeks ago, I got some news. The kind of news nobody wants. The kind that makes you think about what you've done with your time and who you want to spend your remaining time with. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. You could hear the ambient hum of the studio lights. The distant shuffle of a camera operator adjusting position. The collective held breath of 300 people. Doc Severinsen had lowered his trumpet. Ed McMahon had set down his papers. The crew stood perfectly still. Johnny's face had gone pale. "Bob." "I'm dying, Johnny." Bob said it simply. Factually. The way you'd report the weather. "Cancer. Started in my lungs, spread to my liver. They give me maybe 3 months. Maybe less." The audience gasped. Several people started crying immediately. Johnny blinked rapidly. Once. Twice. Trying to process. Trying to maintain composure. trying to be the professional he'd always been. But his hands were shaking slightly. I came here tonight, Bob continued, because I've been on a lot of stages in my 90 years. I've performed for presidents and soldiers and kings and regular folks. But this stage, your stage, Johnny, this is where I always felt most at home. And I needed to stand here one more time before I can't stand anywhere anymore. Johnny's throat worked. You could see him swallowing hard. Fighting. Bob, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Bob smiled. That smile. Even now. Even facing his own mortality. You've been saying it for 30 years. Every time you had me on. Every time you laughed at my jokes even when they weren't that funny. Every time you made me feel like I still mattered even as the world moved on and forgot about old comedians. The world didn't forget you, Bob, Johnny said, his voice rough. Maybe not completely. But let's be honest. I'm a relic. My kind of comedy is from another era. But you never made me feel that way. You always treated me like I was still relevant. Still important. And that meant more to me than any award or honor or standing ovation. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny turned to his director, visible in the wings. Made a cutting gesture across his throat. The universal signal for stop. The director's eyes widened. They were live. On air. National television. But Johnny didn't care. He looked at the cameras. We're going to take an unscheduled break, he said directly to the lens. To America. When we come back. I don't know. But Bob Hope is here and he's not leaving until he's ready. And neither am I. The network cut to commercial. In those 3 minutes, backstage was chaos. Producers frantically calling executives. Executives calling producers. Legal departments getting involved. Schedule coordinators panicking. Advertisers demanding explanations. Johnny ignored all of it. He walked Bob to his desk. Sat him in the guest chair. Pulled his own chair around so they were sitting next to each other. Not across from each other. Not host and guest. Just two men. Two friends. Two human beings looking at mortality. Ed McMahon brought them both water. His hands were shaking when he set the glasses down. Doc Severinsen had tears running down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some were crying. Some were holding hands with strangers. All were witnessing something that wasn't supposed to happen on television. When they came back from commercial, Johnny didn't return to his usual seat. He stayed next to Bob. The cameras had to adjust. This wasn't the standard setup. But nobody cared about the standard setup anymore. Bob, Johnny said, his voice gentle. You said you needed to stand on this stage one more time? Why? Bob looked at him. Really looked at him. The way you look at someone when you're memorizing them. When you're trying to carry their face with you into whatever comes next. Because this is where I felt most alive in my last years. Not on a movie set. Not at an awards show. Here. Talking with you. Making people laugh one more time. Feeling like I still had something to offer. He paused. Took a sip of water. His hands trembled slightly, but he managed. I've made a lot of mistakes in my 90 years, Johnny. Missed birthdays. Prioritized the wrong things. Spent too much time chasing applause and not enough time with the people who actually mattered. But you were always kind to me. Even when I was difficult. Even when my jokes bombed. Even when I was clearly past my prime. You treated me with dignity. Johnny's eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. Bob, you're a legend. You deserve dignity. Legends are just people who lived long enough to become stories. Bob said. But you made me feel like a person. Not a legend. Not a relic. A person. And I wanted to thank you for that before I can't thank anyone for anything anymore. The audience was openly sobbing now. The camera operators were struggling to keep their shots steady. One of the cameramen had to step away entirely, too overwhelmed to continue. His colleague took over both cameras. Johnny reached over and took Bob's hand. Held it. Right there on national television. Two icons of American entertainment holding hands like scared children. Because that's what they were in that moment. Not icons. Just humans. Confronting the reality that time runs out for everyone. I don't want you to go, Johnny said simply. I know. I don't want to go either. But we don't get to decide these things. Bob squeezed Johnny's hand. What we do get to decide is how we spend the time we have. And I'm spending mine here. With you. On this stage. Where I've always felt most at home. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Johnny took a shaky breath. Composed himself as much as he could. Looked at the camera. Bob Hope has been a part of American culture for longer than most of us have been alive. He's entertained troops in every major conflict since World War II. He's made generations laugh. He's shown us what grace and humor look like even in the darkest times. And tonight, he's showing us what courage looks like. He turned back to Bob. What do you need? What can I do? Bob smiled. Just sit with me for a while. Tell me a joke. Make me laugh one more time. So that's what Johnny did. For the next 20 minutes, the format of The Tonight Show disappeared entirely. There were no other guests. No comedy sketches. No planned segments. Just Johnny Carson and Bob Hope sitting together, telling old stories, sharing memories, laughing through tears. Bob talked about USO tours. About soldiers who never made it home. About the weight of making people laugh when the world was falling apart. Johnny talked about growing up watching Bob on television. About how Bob had influenced his own career. About gratitude and friendship and time. The network executives stopped calling. The producers stopped panicking. Everyone just let it happen. Let it be what it needed to be. Because some moments are bigger than format. Some moments matter more than schedules. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Bob reached into his jacket pocket. Pulled out a small envelope. Worn. Clearly old. He handed it to Johnny. This is a letter, Bob said, that I wrote to you 20 years ago. After my wife died. I was in a dark place. Didn't want to perform anymore. Didn't want to do anything. And you had me on the show. You didn't make me talk about her death. You just let me be sad. Let me sit here and be human. And after that show, I went home and wrote this letter thanking you. But I never sent it. Because I was embarrassed. Because men of my generation don't talk about feelings. Johnny held the envelope carefully. Can I read it? That's why I brought it. Johnny opened it slowly. Pulled out a single handwritten page. Read it silently. His jaw tightened. His eyes filled. When he finished, he carefully folded it back and put it back in the envelope. Thank you, Bob, he whispered. Bob nodded. Thank you, Johnny. For 30 years of making me feel like I still mattered. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Bob stood. Slowly. Carefully. Johnny stood with him. Helped him. And they embraced. Not for the cameras. Not for the audience. Just for each other. Two men saying goodbye. The audience rose. Every single person. Standing ovation that lasted over 5 minutes. Bob waved. Smiled. That hope smile one last time. Then he walked off the stage. Slowly. Johnny watched him go. Didn't try to stop him. Didn't call him back. Just watched. When Bob disappeared behind the curtain, Johnny turned to the camera. Tears streaming freely now. Bob Hope taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing on stage when you're terrified and making people laugh anyway. Tonight, he taught me something else. That dignity isn't about hiding your pain. It's about sharing it with the people who love you. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Bob Hope died 11 weeks later. 90 years, 1 month, and 6 days old. The letter he gave Johnny was framed and hung in Johnny's private office. Never shown publicly. Never discussed. Just there. A reminder that beneath the jokes and the lights and the applause, there were real friendships. Real love. Real loss. Johnny Carson retired 8 months after that night. He never said it was because of Bob. But everyone who knew him understood. Bob's death had shown him that time doesn't wait. That there are more important things than ratings and schedules. The Tonight Show continued. New hosts. New formats. New eras. But the people who were there that night, the crew, the audience, the millions watching at home, never forgot the night Bob Hope refused to leave Johnny Carson's stage. Because he wasn't leaving a stage. He was saying goodbye to a friend. And Johnny stopped the show to let him.